Let's do this thing.
So, hello. Welcome to my new podcast series, Starving Artist. I am a starving artist, and here with me I have my guest,
A former starving artist.
former starving artist, Mark Craig. So, for those who do not know who this man is, would you like to introduce yourself, Mark?
Well, I'm a documentary filmmaker for the most part these days, but I actually started out as a graphic designer. I went to art college, trained in motion graphics, got a job at the BBC for a few years, then Channel 4, doing idents and title sequences for programs. And I guess it was really doing that kind of work that led me into watching many more films and documentaries. And I then, at some point in my kind of mid-30s, kind of kidded myself that I might be able to give it a go myself. And that was a little over 20 years ago now.
Right. So, what was, like, out of curiosity, what was, like, that transition from, like, going to graphic designer to going into full-blown filmmaking, like documentary filmmaking specifically?
Yeah, I wouldn't say the transition was from immediately into full-blown filmmaking. I did little jobs on various productions. I was a production assistant. I did a bit of, additional filming here and there. I was spending a lot more time in edit suites because I cottoned on pretty quickly that really documentaries are made or broken in the edit. And so editing became incredibly interesting to me, and I spent whatever spare time I could on people's spare editing equipment, which was pretty clunky in those days. It wasn't as accessible as it is now,
What did you use, like, as an editing software?
I mean, tape
or
machines.
Anything.
So there were tape machines that you literally queued it up and you entered a time code and you pressed the button and the tapes would rewind and then you do an analog edit.
Oh god. So it's like, analog, doing audio work essentially in the studio back in like the 60s, but you're working with tape.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And you had to sort of build it up chronologically as well, and which really meant that you had to kind of be very clear about the plan that you made, because if you went back to an earlier part of the cut and changed it, the whole tape would go down a generation and it would look more crap than it already did anyway. So yeah, it was looking back now, it was absolutely prehistoric. When Avid came along and Final Cut Pro and of course Premiere now, which is my kind of tool of choice. Not that I'm an editor, I play around on it, but the other very important thing that I learned as a documentary filmmaker really is that the relationship between editing and directing, the director-editor relationship is absolutely key to turning out a good film.
No, that's right. Like, you had to be, like, when I was sort of working on my own projects, but not just, like, my last project, which you sort of helped out with executively anyway. You were, like, helped out where you could with my film Inconvenience Store, and that was while editing that I'd worked before as a director with the editor a lot previously. There was one really crap horror film I did. It was like, I think, the beginning of my second year, and I always like use that for reference because it was a film that was just so like disastrous, like in every single way, and it was the first time I'd made a film where I knew every single little mistake can't be made, or if it does, then you'll have to find a solution for it way down the road, basically, which is what I found out. Funnily enough, this was a prop. This notebook, I was actually a prop for it, but I remember, like, while the editing process, I remember my editor at the time just said, this is shit. This is shit. I can't make this work. This is impossible. And then he managed somehow, with my little experience that I had, somehow kind of cobbled it together into something that kind of worked with his experience combined with mine, and it is now somewhat tolerable in comparison to what it was.
Yeah. And it was those early forays into editing. And I never wanted to be an editor, but cutting your own material really taught you sometimes painful lessons about the coverage you should have got. And in some cases can never get again. You know, I mean, I was doing a lot of traveling at that time and documenting my travels, and I'd come back and put them all together, and like I'd be missing an establishing shot or a close up or a cutaway or just really basic stuff. Or I'd forgotten to turn the microphone on when I interviewed somebody, you know, and had no sound, just a goldfishing guy. So these were all, I mean, and they were only in really my kind of home movie projects, but they were really valuable lessons in filmmaking. And then I guess after 2 or 3 years had gone past of some kind of transition, I mean, I was still doing my graphic job. And I should actually mention that at the time, we were talking about the 90s now, you know, I graphic designers working in television still very much had to shoot live action, because we were doing promo material, or we'd need, you know, we'd get somebody in a studio or film props, everything. So I did understand a certain amount of live action filming as opposed to just animation or graphic, you know, technology.
You had to do like Channel 4 bumpers and stuff. I remember
all of those
you
things.
showed,
Yeah. My office at home is full of Channel 4 paraphernalia from that time.
You had I think the one that like you showed in class once that I thought was like particularly fun was the Halloween one you made. You had it filmed in a graveyard, was it?
That's right.
Right, and it was like you had to just use very bare, minimal stuff to get the effect that you wanted.
Yeah,
and it just worked.
it was one of those times where, because some jobs we used to get, you know, a bit of a budget and some time to do it. Others used to come in last minute. It's like, quick, there's been a change of programming.
Like, how last minute was it? Like, it was just a day?
No, it was days rather than weeks. But I think they changed the programming schedule, like, you know, maybe 5 days before, and they suddenly thought, okay, we need to brand this. And I think, I can't remember exactly what it was now, but some entire sort of season dropped out, and they put in a horror themed weekend, because there was loads of those kind of films, you know, lurking in the Channel 4 vault.
And like Halloween was approaching or something.
I can't even remember, but basically, very quickly we had to come up with a scary 4. But there was no budget. Certainly no budget to spend externally on other sort of, you know, talent and facilities. So we all had to do it in-house. And I literally found a cardboard cutout Channel 4 logo, which was in colour. And I didn't want colour.
Where'd you find it?
Oh, you know, it was lurking in some cupboard somewhere. Or, you know, right. It was like a window display Channel 4 kind of thing. But I noticed on the back of that logo, it was all black, and I thought, well, that's a good start. You know, that and I can always shoot that and then flip it in editing. So we got a black logo. You know, wrong way around, but hey, that didn't matter. And literally after a few phone calls, just managed to, you know, get permission to get some shots in an old Victorian graveyard in northwest London. Came back, blagged a couple of hours in an edit suite, you know, added some smoke and scary music.
And like flipped it in post, I imagine.
Flipped it in post.
Yeah, fix it in post, you know, whatever.
Added some smoke, put some scary music on it, and and I superimposed a skull, which just happened to, I don't know, just, you know, you can just get a picture of a skull anywhere really, and I just, it was white, and I was able to just key it on top, and it just sort of really simple, like, you know, one shot, couple of layers on top, scary music, done.
Absolute cry and shame that you didn't put any cobwebs over it, though.
Well, I didn't have to. That was beyond my non-existent budget. But the funny thing that I remember about that was that was the one job that I won a Promax for. A Promax kind of is a sort of, you know, a nice award to get in the whole promotions sort of business. And I had spent a lot of time and on other projects and working, with good budgets and in studios and high concept things, trying to do the best work I could, and it was the one that was cobbled together with nothing that won the award. And that, I think, teaches you a very valuable lesson, that it isn't just because you throw money at the screen doesn't mean to say you're going to have a good film. I think you just got to just have a really simple, good idea, done well, and that can really connect with an audience in a way than just blowing it in a much more indulgent way,
or just limiting yourself to just the right levels where you need it to go.
Yeah,
like just keep your ideas as simple as possible, and then it'll go a lot easier, so you don't overthink it.
That was the bottom line, pressure of time, pressure of lack of budget. Got to come up with an idea, and I was quite experienced by then, so I you have a few ideas that are in the toolbox, if you like, and anyway, but it was. I'm really glad that happened, because it did teach me that sometimes you don't need months and months of freedom, a big budget, and a whole heap of people. You can do things pretty well, pretty simply.
So, Mark, you'll be
especially if you are an impoverished filmmaker.
That's true. If you're a starving artist.
Sorry.
Yeah, impoverished artist is also pretty good as well.
Okay.
I was workshopping all the different titles.
Okay.
Past month, and we found that starving artist applied pretty well to me, and other potential guests that we may have. I have one thing that you'll be pleased to know, Mark. I watched High Hopes.
Oh yeah,
I watched it, and yeah, quite enjoyed it. I thought that it had this really nice, like, bittersweet sort of ending. I think the thing that hit me the hardest, for those who don't know, by the way, High Hopes is Mark's film about sort of going to see his old schoolmates, basically, from university, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and sort of seeing how they are about 30 odd years after graduation, and then just seeing how they are, sort of seeing how that could reflect new students and modern students and even future students, and seeing, how that sense of ennui, that sense of you finished everything. So what do you do with yourself after that? And that's something that was a really interesting thing that your documentary asked, I think, from your perspective, but probably other people's perspectives going in. And I loved that the bit where you sort of said, where you asked everyone, "What are you happy? Do you have any regrets with the outcome?" And there was a couple people who said, yeah, I wish I kind of done this and that, but a lot of them were pretty happy with where they ended up anyway, because even though they were quite lost at first, they sort of found their niche, they found their comfort in the end after all that, which is quite interesting. I mean,
this is a very deep question that you ask, because you get into, well, what is the meaning of life's journey?
What is the meaning of the things that we do to get to this point?
Yeah, and I think most of us sort of go into the next thing, whatever that may be, with maybe some kind of mini plan or some idea of a direction to go in next, and of course leaving after graduation is a big one. But that's kind of why I called it High Hopes in a way, because we young guns all sort of wanting to get out there and make our mark in the world.
I was going to ask why you called it that, actually.
And life sometimes has other plans. Life sometimes gives you a big old wave to ride some years, and other times it kicks you in the teeth and puts you on the side of the road for a while until you regroup. And I don't think anybody escapes those kind of moments.
It fits, because there was one of the new students that you interviewed in the documentary. They're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be rich and famous, I'm gonna be rolling in it, but I'm gonna get a really expensive car. And I'm like, that's your ambitions are quite high there.
And you know what? That guy achieved those things.
Wait, did he?
Yeah. It wasn't in graphic. It wasn't in graphic design, but he moved into, I believe, fashion, and he is now a successful operator in the world of fashion, of which I know nothing about. I don't think it really matters which. Because we train to do a certain thing, or we specialize at uni to do a certain thing. You know, I trained as a motion graphic designer, but I ended up making documentaries. I don't think it really matters, because if you have a creative gift inside you and some drive, you will start to recognize opportunities out there, and you kind of go, do you know what? I'm going to give that a go.
Even if that thing, you find a dead end in that thing, don't give up, and you find another venue. Another avenue. There's
a space somewhere for your talent. I'm a firm believer of that, and the older I get, the more I believe it, actually, because I'm probably ready after 25 years of making documentaries to still be a storyteller, but tell them in different ways. You know, there's all kinds of new exciting possibilities out there, and maybe some of it will involve me going back to what I once did. For example, animation. You know, I'm very interested in revisiting graphic animation and seeing what stories I can tell doing that.
You still touch on that every so often, like in your own work, I think. Even like High Hopes sort of has bits of animation and sort of visual storytelling in there.
Exactly. It's one of the tools in my box, and you know, all of us have different capabilities and different talents. You know, and I guess sometimes when I'm telling a story and I just have this kind of black hole and I don't know how to fill it, animation is my go-to. Whereas, I don't know, somebody like Ken Burns can linger for 30 seconds on one great photograph, you know. So I don't know, there's different techniques to you know, cover what you need to know. But High Hopes was one of those personal films I make. Every once in a while, I mean, I find other people much more interesting. You know, people who've achieved great things in their life or sport or whatever, and I love to make films about those guys. But once in a while I do mine my own life and inner circle for subject matter, and certainly approaching the age of 50, which I was at the time, along with all my, you know, fellow graduates from back in the day, I just began to wonder, you know, what was how their journey to that point had been, and I just went in search of them. Facebook, I think, had only literally been invented in the last previous 2 or 3 years, so suddenly all these names from my past were starting to pop up, and that was
going to say, when was this shot? Like, you film it?
I began filming in 2008.
Oh, yeah.
Finally got some money 2010. Not enough, but enough to keep it going, and pay an editor and pay a cameraman, and you know, do it sort of properly. I mean, I have made those films where I shoot it all, and I'm the sound guy, and I've, you know, set it all up as a producer. Then I'm interviewing as the director, and you know, sooner or later something falls over that I should have given more attention to. So it is good to have a little bit of a budget so you can get some assistance. But yeah, that was one of those personal films, and it was quite an emotional journey of a film to make, actually, because you know.
I was gonna ask, like, what was that experience like, seeing all those guys again? Because I know it's like, for you hadn't seen them in like 2 decades or something like that, right? Or something like a long stretch of time. So what was that sort of thing? Did all the memories kind of come back?
Oh yeah,
all at once?
And not all of them were good. I mean, of course we had a laugh, and some kind of journey of life hopefully gives you a bit of maturity and perspective, and you kind of look back and you go, you know what, we were pretty sort of dumb young things, but that's okay, you know. One of the guys I decided to focus on, because I chose 7 characters from that class, all of whom were very kind of diverse, and
they were characters in their own way, and they went on interesting paths.
Yeah, and one of them was my first year roommate. And we shared a room in a hall residence for 2 terms, and we hated each other. And that hate was entirely based upon the clothes we wore and the music we liked. which it does when you're 18. You know, we made very harsh judgments.
It's so familiar to me as well.
You know,
so,
but meeting up with him many years on, I just saw him as another human being, and a really decent human being. And I said, you know what, I'm sorry I was so kind of judgmental, because I was just like a rockhead and you were a punk guy, new wave. And I really enjoyed his company, and it was really nice to see how the passage of time can actually bring you closer together. Whereas others who I may have been closer to at the time, I kind of thought, okay, I don't need to spend too much time in your company anymore. But no, it's those personal films are really enjoyable, emotional, interesting, but you do have to retain some sense of objectivity, and this is where working with an editor really comes into play, because the editor I work with, he didn't know any of those people. He wasn't emotionally attached to any of them, or we got to keep this shot or whatever. He goes, no, so we're focused on the story, and that's really good.
Whatever was the clearest that painted the story out. And not any of the small anecdotes in the middle of it, I imagine. Yeah,
well, it's kind of, I mean, it was a very simple structure. It just basically had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it roughly played out chronologically. So after setting up the premise at the beginning, and I should say that what was a real valuable source of archive was the fact that because we were art students, all of us took lots of pictures. We had sketchbooks full of drawings of each other. We did artwork, so there was a kind of like quite a rich source of personal archive. We all crammed into photo booths to take pictures of each other, that kind of a thing. So it had a certain charm. And I kind of knew before even embarking on the project that there were probably going to be some things that were radically different for students today than it was in our day, and there were certainly a few of those.
The culture definitely seemed very different.
Yeah. Whereas there are also some things that just never change. There's a whole cycle of life, that students in whatever era, you kind of go through the same stuff, the same emotional challenges, the same self-doubts, the same misguided confidence sometimes, but
kids are arrogant and very opinionated is the main takeaway.
But don't worry, life will just give you a little
very gentle little nudge. Don't do that
along the way, so you all straighten out, and you never stop learning. I don't want to sound like I'm some wise old sage who knows it all. I don't. I'm still figuring out some stuff myself. And when as a creative person, when you figured out something, you then sometimes want to just do something else, and it's like create a new challenge for yourself anyway. So anyway,
I remember like while I was working on Inconvenience 3 came in, and you talked to me about like my acting, which was a funny thing because that was one of my old sort of outlets creatively was acting, and you had like a lot more questions about it than I expected, because I hadn't really done this in a while. Like acting wasn't something that I particularly like care for now as much as I used to. But it was weird because for so long I was sort of put down as you're not really an actor, this isn't your thing. And then when I went to do film, it was like people were like, yeah, this is definitely your thing, and this is definitely like something you should do. And then it's so funny that like 3 years later, after that's all over and done with, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna put acting behind me. And then they're like, hey, we need an actor. I'm like, I guess, because I don't really trust anyone else to do it, because I don't know many actors here. I don't know like people who have that experience. So I'd always be the one to sort of go, yeah, I'll do this. And then I'd always be there. I'm in like multiple films for some reason, and I'd always pop up, and then I get people like you telling me that I'm like surprisingly good. Well, where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it was your performance in the other film that was really noticeable as well. But
yeah, this was a film where I played a really creepy mortician character, which will be released at some point.
Yeah,
whenever it does.
Yeah. Typecast again, Joel?
Once again.
But no, I think I want to make a very important point about this because I mean, at the end of the day, my main job title these days is a director. Okay, now I mainly direct documentaries, but I also have directed, corporate films, music, promos, fly on the wall stuff I do little bits and pieces, but the main focus is directing. Now, the more of those other jobs that you've actually had a go at yourself, then the better I think you become as a director when it comes to dealing with editors, cameramen, sound people, because I've shot a few documentaries myself, and I've done a little bit of editing, but it now means that when I'm just directing and I'm working with a proper cameraman, a cinematographer, which I'm not, I can at least express some desire of what it is I'm after. I have some working knowledge of lenses, or what light levels are going to give you some, grain in the film or whatever, or noise in the video. Same with music. I've played in a bunch of bands going back a few years, and while my so-called musical career didn't exactly pan out, it gave me a really good working knowledge of dealing with musicians and recording techniques, and that meant that when I then became a filmmaker and I had to deal with composers or sound designers and sound mixers, again, at least I have a basic knowledge of what gadgets like this do, and whether this microphone might be like omnidirectional or unidirectional, whether there's a bit of wind on the top, do we need a gag, I'm being careful not to knock on the table, for example, because I know that vibrates through the stand and into there. So all these little things ultimately help. He said kicking the table instead. All these little things I think help. Everything in life teaches you something, and you can then be a better director, actor for that matter, or just hopefully, all-round human being.
Yeah, I think directing's helped me become a better human being, personally, I would say. Because it was like, I think before it was like when I was doing acting for so many years. I mean, this was going back before I even studied it. It was always a thing of working with people and working with like different creatives, and film is a completely different thing where it's like with acting you're battling egos. You're battling your own ego, but you're battling other egos that are in the room, and everyone has that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an actor, you have that problem by default. That's the very notion of doing it is. Yeah.
Some more than others.
Some more than others, yeah. But film isn't quite as much that. It's more of a battling of artistic creativity and ideas, and if you fight for supremacy basically in any sort of field. So if you're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna do all of this, and it's like people won't know what they're gonna do, right? Like, and then they just think, okay, this guy's gonna do all of it. And that's a thing I've noticed that I've done, or at least with some directors, even like directors like, not to compare myself to George Lucas, but George Lucas did this where he was very about his creative vision and didn't want people messing with it, even though he had to work in a team to make it better, and he just wouldn't listen to certain people. And then eventually he relented, and here we have Star Wars, So I think it's just having to just really bring in perspectives everywhere as much as possible.
Yeah.
And let everyone have their shot at making the film, essentially.
But this is where the job on a director, it is on the director to at least keep some kind of focus. And of course, it adds value to have people bring something to the table that is fresh and something deeper that they might not have thought about. But at the same time, you do have to kind of grasp those new, fresh ideas, but also don't let it just run away.
Don't let your baby run away from the other thing. Yeah,
you
it's giving them motivation to feel like it's theirs too. And I feel like, I've seen that in so many projects, not just like the last one I made. This is like a real pattern, and I only really noticed it when I looked back at it. And I realized, like it's not about me, it's the project, it's as a whole.
It's the story.
It's the story.
Story is king, and,
Yes.
and everything, the look, the sound, the performance has to ultimately serve that story.
Yeah.
And that's what is uppermost, or should be, in the director's mind, and the editor, of whatever genre of film. But I think certainly, as an actor yourself, you will understand that everybody that you're directing does have some kind of a process that they need to kind of like go through and tap into, or maybe go away and quietly prepare outside, and others will just give you something different every time or whatever. But at least you have... your experience in acting will have no doubt made you a better, more accommodating director, I think.
Yeah, I think it did. I think that was something that a lot of people told me. It was like I focused on, I think, the actors more than the cinematographer, because I've realized I'm not a cinematographer. It's not my thing.
Yeah,
I like doing sound. I'm very comfortable with what I've been brought up in. Even like doing this, for example, like I'm more comfortable around a microphone than in front of a camera. That was something I realized very early on. Because even before this, I did voice acting, and that's for some people saying this, they probably know this. Other people don't, but that used to be my thing. And that thing had very mixed results. And it was a job that wasn't like firm. It wasn't a firm place. It wasn't somewhere that felt like I could do something with this. It never felt like that. Like I could practice, I could do all these things, but I didn't have the motivation or even the drive to really do it, because it didn't reward as much. And you've got to put up with that a lot. And I think voice actors have to put up with that for a long time before they can get any work that's at all worthwhile for them, both financially and creatively.
Sure. But that's a good, again, another little good discipline to have done for a while. Did you ever do impressions?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it wasn't something that I did too much. I think it was funny because I got several jobs off of the backs of like someone saying, hey, this guy can do like an impression of this guy, bring him in. And I was like, why? This is stupid. And then I go in and I do it, and then everyone's like, that was really dumb, but you got a weird voice, I like it. And he just hired me, and I was in this project for like years because of that. It's like a weird, funny little story from that, but it just sort of happens. But generally, like in terms of impressions, it wasn't really something I like to do. I just like to do wacky voices and deep announcery voices, and stuff like that. Wasn't really
Final comment I want to make about actors and egos and things like that. It's probably one of the reasons I was kind of probing your mind when we were talking about your cut in the edit there, because I've very much come from a post-production and a film craft, and I haven't had a lot of time with actors, and I've done a lot of workshops with Directors UK and the Actor Centre in Covent Garden, and just to kind of hone my skills, if you like. I was fascinated, for example, when I went to there's a Meissner school somewhere in town, and that was really interesting to see that almost deconstruction of an ego, or demolition.
Yes. Yeah, demolition of an ego is pretty accurate.
Yeah,
Sanford Meisner. For those who don't know who Sanford Meisner is, he was a crazy practitioner that I think used a lot of like Stanislavski techniques and then completely deconstructed it. So Stanislavski was like a big practitioner who was big into the idea of like, oh yeah, think of some messed up things from your life and put that into your performance, and like the storytelling and where did they come from, the fourth wall, all that. And Sanford Meisner was trained under Stanislavski, I believe, and then went, okay, what if I did that, but instead, it's going to be about impulse and about completely taking yourself out of your head and doing like the thing that isn't, necessarily acceptable or like crazy or weird, and just embracing that, not being self-conscious, which all actors are self-conscious.
Yeah, but the big take-home point that I took home from that is that if you really, really focus on listening to what the other actor is doing, that will bring out of you hopefully a more authentic performance yourself. And so even doing this with you, I'm letting go of anything that I particularly want to use as some kind of grandstand, but I'm really listening to you and what you're asking me and what you're talking about, so I can hopefully genuinely respond to that. And I think a lot of us in life often don't listen anyway. Never mind in filmmaking or directing actors. We all have opinions, and we're very keen to sort of sometimes get them out there. But it is really important to listen to others. And I've been guilty as an ex-person, sometimes not really hearing what they're trying to tell me.
Same here.
But as I said, through sheer time and the love and patience of girlfriends and partners and whatever, us guys eventually get there.
We get there eventually. Or we learn over time.
Hopefully.
That was, but what was, because I didn't know you went to like any acting workshops or did anything around that. What specific type of work did you do?
As a director.
There
were workshops for me to work with actors in a workshop full of other actors and directors, actually. So
in a Meisner workshop as well, or in a Meisner sort of field, or whatever.
Different workshops.
Right.
So you've really got to get over the fear of walking on a set and being amongst other people. All are going to go, have an opinion about whether you're doing a good job or not. If you're worried about that, you're going to just crumble. So you've got to just plunge yourself into it, throw yourself on that sword, and I was very keen to just make that area of discomfort, comfortable. It's like when I used to play in a band, and before you go on stage, of course you're thinking, oh my God, this is like, I'm
have
really
that one
nervous.
guy in the audience be like, this shit sucks.
We've had it. We've had that guy.
You've had that guy that said this shit sucks.
More than one guy, unfortunately, but there were also those nights which were like stellar and joyful. But the point I'm making, the more of this stuff that you can bring yourself to do, put yourself in front of a live mic to a listening radio audience, or in front of camera, or in a workshop situation, it becomes kind of normal, and it's fine, and that's how you can then start doing your job properly. I think making films in so many ways is all about managing other human beings.
Yes.
And understanding what their agendas are, or issues might be, or distractions, because everybody has other stuff going on, and they've come to a film set or whatever, and they might have just split up with their wife or whatever, and you not that it's any of your business, but you need to maybe sometimes carry somebody through for a couple of days until they so there's a kind of duty of care now, which we're very much more aware of, instead of just bawling somebody out.
Did you ever have like a time where it was? Do you have like a moment as a filmmaker where it was like the most chaotic time and the most like, I don't know, insane shoot?
Well,
something like that.
I do remember a short drama film that I made about 20 years ago, and it was overly ambitious. We didn't have enough money. The cast and crew was sort of cobbled together, and as I said, the ambition was bigger than the resources, and I set myself up for a tough week.
What kind of ambition was it? Like how?
Well, it was supposedly a romantic comedy, and they're not easy to get right. it was a period costume drama as well, so there was all kinds of issues with dressing the set and costumes and getting hold of those and getting them back in on time. All kinds of props and pyrotechnics and
Pyrotechnics?
and effects, light, mirror balls and like, filming near water. I mean, we lost some equipment in a canal.
Oh my God.
Like there was all kinds of dramas going on. I slept a maximum of 4 hours a night for about 10 days. And I think the biggest mistake I made and ultimately learnt from that film was casting is really important. You can't just pull together all the actors that you happen to know, or the producer has a friend who's an actor or whatever. You bring them together, and there was a real lack of chemistry in some areas, or somebody just couldn't do the thing that I really wanted them to do. So I think casting really became important to me after that. I also didn't spend enough time with actors because I didn't know how to. That was the moment that I thought, you know what, I really need to do a whole bunch of workshops and understand actors a lot more. I need to read actors' books. And that taught me a very valuable lesson, because I was all about, maybe not that I'm comparing myself to George Lucas or a commercials director, but it's all about the look. It was all about shots but actors, they want to know what's going on in their character, and I wasn't interested enough in that. I thought they would just read the words on the page and
it's like you'll figure out on your own, it's fine. You're professionals,
Yeah. So I gave a lot of emphasis to the film craft and everybody all around me, but not enough to the actors, and that was absolutely my bad. And of course they didn't, appreciate that at all. But again, you've got to, if you're going to make a career out of anything in life, you've got to accept and understand that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do something that's not a particularly good bit of work.
No matter how experienced you are, you're going to screw up at some point.
Yeah. And you've got to take the positives and go, okay, I did this okay, but I really need to work on this area. And that's what I've, I guess, always tried to do. Or ultimately understand, you know what, Mark? This area is just not your thing. You need help with that. You need to get like a line producer in or co-produce, with another producer. You can't. We all have our limits, and we have to understand what we're good at, what we're not good at, and bolster ourselves.
When it came to like actor chemistry, I think this is something that you can't just do, like just on the day or among actors. Like something that I use a lot for reference, because I'm a big fan of David Lynch. I use him for reference, like for everything I do. But one of my favorite things that Lynch would do, and I think that he did this with Blue Velvet, was he got Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern together, and he would actually have like days with the two of them. So it'd be the three of them hanging out and having chemistry days just to hang out and be friends and get them to know each other.
That's cool.
It's a huge chemistry workshop basically, but just in real life. They're just like having some dinner at a diner or whatever, playing, going bowling or something, playing pool together or whatever, having some drinks, and that's it,
Yeah.
And they get to really know each other. So by the time they're on the set, they have a very visible connection with each other that you can't replicate, no matter how good of an actor you are.
Yeah.
That little glimmer in someone's eyes when they see someone, like whether that's a friend or someone that they're interested in or whatever, that's only something you can really get from building that friendship beforehand. And I love that David Lynch did that. I think it's something I wanted to do for Inconvenient Store. It's what I've wanted to do for several films, but it was always a time problem. It was always something to do with the planning or something gone wrong in the middle of it. And so even if I tried to organize it in some way, sometimes it would just be the wrong person, and they're not really into that. And then that would be another problem. Or just be like, it was always the wrong place, wrong time sort of way of doing it. But if I had more time and if I'd done that, then yes, there would have been a lot more of like just workshopping it, getting to know each other in a really deep personal way.
I think 10-pin bowling is an underrated kind of activity because if you took a bunch of actors 10-pin bowling, you would very quickly understand which of them are like super competitive or which of them just want to have a laugh, which of them become team players or whether they're just in their own kind of thing.
Whether they go against it,
it's. I think those things are incredibly valuable, and
even just talking to them, I think going even against just the idea of reading for a scene, just having a conversation with them, and seeing how they actually are, which is actually how I cast. Generally, is I'd only do it in person. I'd get them in, and then we'd sort of talk for a while. I'd get a sense of who they are. Because if I'm going to be working with them for the next week or so, I need to know how they are, who they are, how they deal with things, how driven they are, and if I can get along with them. And also if they're good actors too. I mean, that's a huge thing. But I think if they're people, they can adapt, and they can do, great things. I think with anyone they work with, that's a great sign that they're not just a good actor, they're a good person. And that's what I look for. And that was something some of the best actors I've ever worked with are people that can literally be social chameleons. Like that can just know exactly what kind of person you are and adapt their personality around that in a good way, not like a manipulative weird way, but like in a really positive, hey, I'm going to work with you and I'm going to get along with you.
Yeah, it's inspiring, and definitely took a note of her and of course the Eggman in your film.
There's a crazy character called the Eggman who it was the most nuts thing, because I think it was like when I was writing the script, I was like, there's no way. This is insane. Like I was thinking, I'm going to make something really crazy and really off the wall, but something that's also like funny to me. So I very much appealed to that sort of thing, and the scene with the Eggman is absolutely my humor. It's chaotic, it's weird, it's very intense.
But you found a guy who could really...
And he could actually do that.
He delivered. He delivered for you in spades, and that's fantastic,
And it's like when you work with someone that's really that incredible, like across the board, it's like I've got to work with actors that I never would have dreamed of working with, like beforehand.
That's great.
And that's something that like acting didn't really give me. I feel like enough experience to work with good and bad across the board. And I think that was something really fun. Whereas in acting you get like a lot of, not to disparage anyone in particular, because I'm not, but there's a lot of like pretentiousness in the world of acting. There's like a lot of over complexity. Like I think a lot of actors, a lot of acting lecturers, they overcomplicate what the actual art is, what the craft of acting is. They're like, oh yeah, you need to do this, but really, you just have to feel it. I can't explain it myself. I think people like a couple people asked me like, how do you do it? How do you act? And I'm like, you just feel it. You believe it. Like if you feel like you read a script and go, yeah, I can absolutely buy that. That's a sign of a good script, but that's a sign of a good actor if they can actually know what to do there. And then they can just go, yeah, that's it. And they switch that character on. Absolutely.
I mean, certainly with a director's hat on, I wouldn't want to give any actor too many notes. Just let them talk through the character beforehand. Most importantly, I'm a bit of a freak when it comes to the subtext. What's going on in the story at this point? Because remember, I know it's just this scene. You're reading those lines and you're delivering that. But what has happened prior to this?
Where did they just come from?
What emotions are you carrying? What energy are you carrying? And those are the things I think to remind. And then I think performance, obviously with a good actor, will then come forth.
Yeah.
Anyway, what do I know? I'm still.
You're pretty dead on. Actually, I think it's very close. I think there was a lot of weird parallels when I started uni. When I was studying film, they taught us the same stuff I taught in acting about storytelling, about like how do you make something clear. From an actor's perspective, it's like, okay, the script is there, whatever, who cares? But what can I glean from this? What can I bring to the script that probably wasn't even there? And make it work, and make it think, and then understand the storytelling principles of it. So the basics of like, oh, okay, who am I? You know, where did I just come from? What time is it? What day is it? You know, how is my physicality going to reflect? But then you go into overcomplication, and it's like, that doesn't really matter. No. But they'll go into it even more than I think some directors do, which was very interesting. Kind of like comparing that, because I see them teaching that, and then it's just a really simplified version of what actors are taught.
I'm a very simple man when it comes down to it, really, and I think
well, you need to be.
Just be the most genuine person you can be. You know, if you are gifted with huge amounts of intellect and global travel and like some kind of pedigree on some level, then great. You know, use all that. But I'm not. I've kind of just found my own way in life through quite a meandering journey, and arrived at a particular place. And the films I made 10 years ago will be different to the ones I would naturally make now, because I'm a bit more experienced in life and in other areas, and you just got to embrace who you are and what you have, and hopefully make some kind of connection which produces a bit of magic on the screen, and I can't advise much more than that, quite honestly.
No, that's incredibly true. I think it's when it's like it comes to finding. When it came to like sort of finding your own path, I guess, I mean, like that slow sort of like going from that graphic design background and sort of what was, in your opinion, what was the most rewarding thing about like finding out that you wanted to just be a filmmaker and a documentary filmmaker? I mean, I'm sure I probably asked this before, but
The most rewarding thing, I don't know, that I expected there to be a lot of work to get to do the first film. I guess what was quite rewarding was that first documentary ended up on TV in Wales, BBC Wales, because the subject happened to be Welsh. And that gave me a boost. And the next film I made, even though at the outset it had no designated broadcaster, it wasn't commissioned, it's just like, okay, let's just try and make a good film that gets picked up, and that film got picked up, and so that gave me some kind of confidence that I must be doing something right if TV channels wanted to show it. And there weren't as many then as there are now. You know, this is pre all the streamers. So that was kind of gratifying, but at the same time, I had already worked in television for about 15 years before that. So I kind of, even though I felt very new as a filmmaker, I kind of knew more than I knew, if that makes sense. I had obviously absorbed stuff that I hadn't. You know,
had a better sense of what you wanted to see, I guess, or what you wanted to visually and in storytelling, and what you sort of can glean.
Yeah, because I'd spent a dozen years watching stuff and trying things out and whatever. It wasn't like I was just leaving university and trying to make my first film. I had not been a filmmaker, but I had lived in an environment and a work environment in which even if I'd been making coffee and tea as a runner, I would have learned something. So I think never underestimate the lessons that life gives you in every unusual kind of way, and that realizing that quite early on in my career really did give me wings. And I guess there's just a couple of moments where you kind of go, oh wow, this is a shot in the arm, and I guess it was that second film, I think, or was it the third one after that? It got nominated for an RTS award. We didn't win, But I went to the awards ceremony and I looked at the other producers and filmmakers that I was up against, and it was like, oh my God, there's some serious players here. You know, there's John Batsek, who's won. Now he's won 2 Oscars. There was this other filmmaker who's, you know, and suddenly you find yourself in this kind of arena and you're looking up to all these guys, but someone somewhere has deemed it appropriate that your film is at least worthy of a nomination, you know, and that's kind of surprising. But when you come out of that and you process it and manage that little ego that bubbles up, you kind of go, okay, this has given me confidence. This has given me wings. I'm doing something right. And we all need these little pats on the back or acknowledgements in order to build our careers.
You know what you did right, and so just try and do the things that you did right more. Continue that. Yeah,
and then just when you think you're doing something more right, that's exactly the time when you might get slapped down as like,
you did it too right. You did it too far.
You screwed that one up, man, and be honest about it. So you know, pride comes before a fall and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's possible to go through a career without making a few screw ups now and then, and you've got to be able to bounce back and learn. Just accept that it was a lesson.
It was like Jonah Hill, for example. How he was talking about because this relates a bit to like how you sort of pick these things up from just doing all these little odd jobs here and there. I mean, for example, Jonah Hill was, you know, he's a lead actor and all that, and he's worked with like Martin Scorsese, but he said that his experience working with Scorsese made him want to become a director, and he did it, you know, and he made a really solid film out of that. He's become a really very accomplished, you know, his first film right out the bat, his very first feature, it's really good. And it's very hard to make a good feature-length film that defines your visual style. But I think having the experience of being around someone like Scorsese probably helped that significantly. But there's some people that just feel like they are destined for something greater or something different or something you need to change up about yourself or your art.
Yeah. And I really, I guess as my mind has expanded, or you get bored with the same old thing and you go looking for some inspiration elsewhere. Over the years, I've really embraced other cultures' films. I don't mind watching a film with subtitles at all. One of my favorite films, and I wish I'd made it, was Y Tu Mama Tambien. And Your Mother Too. Kind of, you got to see it. It's a kind of like a love triangle road trip, and I'll say no more, in Mexico, and that. Such a simple premise, but just great performances and scenarios and just real human things. From a stylistic viewpoint, I only recently saw the Kenneth Branagh film Belfast. All shot in black and white, all set in a time, before I was born, but beautiful cinematography and wonderful acting within those beautiful frames, because he himself is an actor, and I'm sure he cast it well. He gave notes to actors really well, and it was like, wow, look at that.
Kenneth Branagh was one of the biggest acting practitioners that we built on in college. So it's I forget that sometimes he's a director as well.
Yeah, I'm not a great fan of some of those kind of highly accomplished British actors. There's a certain type, and they're all A-listers, but I do love Kenneth Branagh's films as a director. I certainly love that one. But at the same time, I loved some of Clint Eastwood's directing. And I get where he learned his craft from, because he worked with some of those Italian directors, Sergio Leone, and I loved those big screen spaghetti westerns, not much dialogue, just great shots, lots of subtext, and you think, great. And he's very economical with the words on the page, on the script, and I like that. I don't like making films that are too wordy. But
in terms of like fictionalized biopics, though, that's something where we don't get a lot of them, where it's way too overly fabricated, in my opinion.
I found the Queen one, Bohemian Rhapsody, a bit formulaic. And
that's mainly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly. Whereas very soon after I saw the Elton John one, Rocket Man, expecting it to be a bit similar, but actually that was way more honest. They were very much more open in showing his drug abuse, the fact he was gay in a time when it wasn't as accepted now.
Helps that Elton was alive.
Yeah,
as well.
It does, but also creatively, it just took that biopic and somehow fused it with some kind of like West Side Story thing, and like I don't know. Initially, I sat there in the audience in the cinema, and my heart sank. I thought, oh no, this is going to be Mamma Mia, and I don't know if I can handle this. But I gave it 10 minutes, and I thought, you know what, I'm being taken somewhere interesting and unexpected and surprising, and I kind of know the character and I know his music, but I totally got on board with it and was taken in a very creative and unusual way. Filmmaking, you're talking about creative filmmaking.
Yeah, it's actually like taking on Elton's musical background. Like he's done some stuff for musicals. He did Lion King. He's done stuff like that before. So it felt more right because he was a very theatrical person.
Yeah.
And so the biopic reflects that. I wasn't a massive fan of Rocket Man, but it is so much more artistically interesting than Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like it's marred by any outside voices. It's definitely Elton John trying to tell a fun story with his life story. And that's, I think, there's not a lot that go for it, I think. Not as much as I'd like to see.
But the great thing about films is that two people will go in and see them, and they'll go to the pub afterwards and have a discussion like we're talking about it now.
Exactly.
There'll be bits that you like, bits that I like, bits that they should have done this, but wow, wasn't that bit cool? And you know what? I'm happy if film just gets people talking to each other and engages us in some way.
I agree. I think that's a fantastic place to end it, I think. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on to this episode.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And good luck with the rest of them.
Right. Thank you so much, man.